Hello and welcome to Time to Talk. In this episode, we complete our review and discussion of the letter Emotional Sobriety by Bill Wilson. Please join us as we uncover, discover, and discard in order to learn new truths. How this line starts at the top of the page, I always think it's like the night before Christmas. And I raced to the dash to see what was the matter with Ma and her kerchief and me and I and my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. It says, "Suddenly I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence, on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these things according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I had fought for them. And when defeat came, so did my depression. There wasn't a chance of making the outgoing love of St. Francis a workable and joyous way of life until these fatal and almost absolute dependencies were cut away. There, it's telling me that to live happy, joyous, and free, I've got to remove or let go of any people, place, or thing that I believe I require for my happiness." That's what it's saying to me. That my happiness, my contentness, my serenity should not depend on other people, places, or things. Because I had over the years undergone a little spiritual development, the absolute quality of these frightful dependencies had never before been so starkly revealed. Reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer, I found I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these faulty emotional dependencies upon people, upon AA, indeed upon any act of circumstance whatsoever. And here, this is part of the journey. For me, it was going back in time to it's how it started, going back in time to the most recent perceived traumatic event, and learning how to forgive everybody. I had been dependent upon my resentments. I had been dependent upon the anger and frustration I felt with everybody in those scenarios. And once I learned how to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done, which is not easy. He talks about exerting every ounce of will that he had available to him. But trying to learn how to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done, it says, well, that's what it's describing for this part of the journey to me, is to cut off these faulty emotional dependencies. So faulty emotional dependencies. What's a faulty emotional dependency? So I depend upon you for happiness, for contentment, for fulfillment, or more appropriately in my case, for my resentments, for my anger, for my mistrust, for my rage, for my fear, which is really what I found I was not comfortable if I was not feeling. So is that an addiction? That I'm not comfortable if I'm not feeling fear? If I'm feeling peace and ease and calm, do I get fidgety and like, what's wrong? Something doesn't feel right.
I think anything new is going to feel weird.
Yes.
Anything out of the normal frequency is going to feel weird. I think I like how you put that, because my resentments were fuel for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
I also look at different things that in the past, I can relate to right now, realizing that some of my sense of purpose and who I am is Mom. My kids getting older. Those dependencies on external circumstances, people, places, and things, doing what I want when I want them to, or turning out, as he says, my perfectionist dreams and specifications, the director of the show that it talks about in the book. And then fighting for that outcome. And when it didn't work out, so did the depression at the end of that initial. So when I think of dependencies also, it's, my spouse isn't doing what I think my spouse should do or how they should do it or anything else. So I'm not okay because they're not acting the way I think they ought to.
Bingo. Like, if they would only act this way or that way, then everything would be okay and I would feel peace and ease and calm. Which, even when they did act that way, the peace and ease and calm didn't come because, or at least for very long.
I can relate to thinking, well, the other shoe to drop thing.
Yeah. Dysthymic disorder.
Yep, and constantly being in that, yeah, it's all right, but, or yeah, it's all right, what if? You know, and always those dependencies, all exterior. I think he sums it up quite well, but can get into every aspect of that. The third paragraph saying, I found I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these emotional dependencies. People, AA, indeed upon any act of circumstance whatsoever. And to me, that circumstance is anything going on out in the world. I think of wearing the world as a loose garment, or being the eye of the storm, no matter what's going on. All those different aspects of life that happen, death, sickness, graduation, good and bad, up and down. Still being okay regardless of how those things turn out.
Popped into my mind when I used to watch the news on a very regular basis and something was going on somewhere in the world that I didn't agree with, how upsetting that would be to me and how fruitless that seems now. Whereas there's plenty to do here, there's plenty to work on in myself, and the focus is taking off of self. The focus comes off of growing self to, I can simply watch the news and be complaining about the sad state of affairs and how these people are behaving across the world, instead of working to improve myself and then my local vicinity. I've got this hula hoop, you see, and inside this hula hoop, I'm responsible for my wellness. And if I can obtain that wellness or go towards it, find other people who are exhibiting the behaviors that I wish to have and then do what they do and move towards that wellness, then others in kind will taste that wellness. They'll witness it and say, well, I want that too. And we start a movement. That's how movements start, and we move together. We begin to move towards a different direction, and it seems so counterculture, counterintuitive, counter-worldly, because we're moving towards what is perceived as unseen. How can I see my wellness? How can I see my fulfillment? How can I see forgiveness? What does that look like?
I don't know what it looks like, but I know how it feels.
Yeah. I spent most of my life acquiring material goods to make myself feel better. Oh, you don't feel like a full, complete person? You don't, feel like you matter in the world? Then you need this automobile. You need a bigger house. You need more of this stuff to make you feel better. And I did that for a vast part of my life, and come to find out I was still as miserable or more than when I began.
I did the same thing, only with people. Wanting those emotional attachments, not knowing how to have healthy emotional attachments. And I'm not just talking relationships, I'm talking with my children, with my spouse, with coworkers, with neighbors, across the board.
See what he says next on this roadmap to freedom.
I like how you put that.
Then only could I be free to love as Francis did. That's my dude, Frank. Emotional and instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing love appropriate to each relation of life. So if I go back to the previous couple of paragraphs, including, the former paragraph, I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these faulty emotional dependencies. And only upon that, cutting off the faulty emotional dependencies, he then follows that up with saying, then only could I be free to love. Emotional and instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing love, appropriate to each relation of life. So there's a lot in this paragraph, in these 3 sentences. There's 2 sentences. There's a lot. Only then could I be free to love as Francis did. So it's actually saying free to love. Well, what does that mean? Is that like a group thing, What are we getting into here? He's like, no. I understand that you all have a misconception of love and what love is. It's not necessarily how your body parts fit together. Let's read what Frank has to say, St. Francis. Let's read what he has to say and learn more about the type of love he's talking about. And there's a beautiful poem, prayer, story. I call them directions for life that Francis wrote. And it really gives us a good look into the direction that this roadmap is going into. And as long as I have Wi-Fi, which I do, I have that right here. And he's talking to his higher power, right? When he's reading this poem or writing this poem, he's talking to his higher power, and he says, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there are shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Looking at it as instructions, and it came along with this letter, looking at this poem, this prayer as instructions, it tells me what to do, and essentially it lists everything I used to do. And it has me asking not to do that, but when I see it, do this instead. So it's telling me how to behave. It's teaching me, if I'm willing to accept it, how to behave going forward. That where there is hatred, I was good at that. I could hate. I could throw hate bombs. I could throw darts. I may bring love. Well, love everybody I hate? Or no, when I see hate, try and bring the spirit of love? Well, what is love? Let's learn more. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. Well, that's been a big one. Learning how to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done. I'm still working on it. And it turns out I forgive somebody for something that I, perceptively they've done to me, and I work through that one and let it go, and then I go a little deeper, and there's more. Oh, I've got multiple resentments for the same person, and they were all hiding under one heading. Right? Of how could you dare do this to me? It was all under that heading, but maybe there's 2, 3, 10, 40 different resentments. That's what I'm learning.
Layers of an onion.
Ooh. Insert donkey here into this video.
Not everybody like onions. Cake! Everybody loves cakes. Cakes have layers. I don't care!
That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there's despair, I may bring hope. I mean, we're talking about a lot of stuff. It all kind of is going along the same avenue. Discord is arguments, right? And sometimes people are going to argue. You just got to let them do what they're going to do. But also, something that's come to me recently is, if not outright showing somebody, just talking about it openly, about the great sameness. Perceptively, I'm different. I'm unique. Perceptively, I want to think I'm super unique and that my circumstances, my scenario is different than everyone else's. No. There's a great sameness. There is a wonderful sameness if I change my perspective from that of I'm better than you or worse than you, because my ego will go both ways, to, well, what are our similarities? How are we the same? And if I can achieve that, finding where we're the same, all of a sudden I don't dislike what's going on so much or that person so much. And let's see here. Where there is error, I may bring truth, helping truth come to light, whatever that looks like, right? And not being afraid, that's something I can relate with, that I wouldn't want to correct somebody for fear of how they would perceive me, for correcting them. And maybe now it's less of entering a correction as it is offering an alternative solution. Potentially. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. Oh, there's a whole new level of that. I had no idea what living in despair was because I didn't know anything different. There's a great line from a movie that says, how do you tell an unborn baby about life? And I think the answer is you don't. You allow it to be born.
Experience is a true teacher.
Yeah. That where there are shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, and here's the big one for me, to love than to be loved. And it became as simple as, how am I going to be a friend to somebody if I don't know what a friend is? So if I learn to be a friend, then I will have friends. If I learn to comfort, I will be comforted. If I learn about love and learn to love, I will then be loved. That's what it's promising me. And that has been my experience. I don't always recognize it, and I want to fight it because, my memories tell me what love is, and it wants to fight the reality of what this is telling me love is. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, possibly helping others, right? Self-forgetting, forget about me, forget about myself, help others, and then I will be helped.
There's such a fine line. There's such a fine line there, in my opinion. And I don't know if by forgetting self,
a price must be paid. That price is destruction of self-centeredness.
and the destruction, in my opinion, of self-centeredness is different than being a doormat. And there is a fine line. Because thine own self be true also. But to me, now, all those opposites, right, where there's hatred, so love. I've been in a situation multiple times on different levels of anger, not responding with anger, has in turn had more anger on the other side because of that. When you don't respond in kind, people aren't necessarily going to like it.
That's fine.
But those outcomes, part of this dependency on these outer things is I'm also not discouraged or feel less of myself because someone doesn't agree with me.
Right.
Or things like that. I think it's all, the action and the emotional all get mixed up into one, and the reaction or the actions on my part are the only thing I have control over. So being true intentions and motives, regardless of what the outcome is is where I'm not emotionally getting dependent. Because I know all kinds of people that really like to hang out with the old me, and they don't like the new me.
Well, but
being
whose
okay
challenge
with
is that?
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's not your challenge, it's theirs.
That's that. Well, it gets more into that having love, offering love, and expressing love. To me, that sums up and just be loving.
I'm reminded of another line is, we don't grovel. You were talking about a doormat. We're not to grovel. We're not to lay down and grovel. We are to stand at our fullest height, closest to our Creator, and not be ashamed of that. I'm not to be ashamed of that. Whatever we call our higher power. Again, disclaimer for spiritual terms that might deter somebody from learning. Replace any words that you disagree with a term of your choice, right? Whatever that may be. It is by self-forgetting that one finds, and maybe that's talking about self. Like if I can forget my old self, the angry self, the dissatisfied self, maybe I can find a new self that cherishes love and light and hope more than it does anger, shadows, and despair. Because I'll admit I was addicted to those things. If I didn't feel upset, if I didn't feel at dis-ease, something's wrong. I wouldn't have been able to admit that, and I wouldn't have been able to put my finger on it. You did earlier. You said waiting for the other shoe to drop. That feeling that, okay, everything's good right now, but what's going to happen? What's about to happen? And there's a name for that. There's a name for that, and if there's a name for it, I'm not the only one. And there's medicines for it to numb me out. And I tried some of those. It didn't work too well for me. I often did not use the medications correctly. Let's finish out these directions. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. So I learned to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done. Who's the only person that doesn't forgive you? The only one out of anything you've ever done. Who's the only person that doesn't forgive you? I'm talking about things you've done. People, whether people remember them or not. Who's the only person that doesn't forgive you? Or the main one, rather.
Myself.
Yeah. You know, and I have a theory on this. I believe it's because I don't know how to forgive. And that I learned to forgive by forgiving everybody for everything they've ever done. And once I'm in that process, I'm learning how to forgive. I'm learning how to let go. Because it's easier focusing on other people than it is on myself, right? I don't want to look at myself. I'm perfect. But if I'm focusing on forgiving everybody for everything they've ever done, eventually I'll learn how to forgive, and then I can apply that to myself and forgive myself for the things that were unforgivable. Oh, I'm going straight to hell. I'm unforgivable. What I've done is unforgivable. All these things. I've heard that so many times. That can't be forgiven. Well, by who? By you or by somebody else or by an entity, by your higher power? Who are we talking about? It's been revealed to me that I'm forgiven for everything I've ever done. Whether people like it or not is a whole nother story. I've been forgiven for everything I've ever done. Just don't do it again. And if I hold on to it beyond that, if I become a changed person, if I find a new direction, right, and live a life of helping others and loving others rather than taking and grabbing and me, if I live a life of trying to help others and not do those acts again, those deeds again, then I am forgiven. But who won't let go? And that's me. I want to hold on to those dark memories, and because it makes me feel powerful, I think. And scratch that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my addiction to feeling wretched.
Something had come to me. Early on, I was told my best thinking got me here. That blew me away. When that actually hit me, that yeah, even through all the blame of everything else, my best thinking, maneuvering, everything about how I dealt with anything got me right to where I was at. You know, going through the process of the steps and things, all through this entire journey, up till literally this moment, that I can't, knowing that my best thinking got me into a very deep, dark hole, then realizing that I can't think my way into better action, but I can act my way into better thinking.
Yeah.
And going through the motions of doing for others, being helpful, being of service. Part of this thing is, you know, service to others. The disconnect starts happening or initially started happening for me. When you talk about forgiveness of others first, I'm trying to think back about when I was first on this side of the fence. I had to come to a level of forgiving myself enough to realize that I'm worth living.
Yeah.
At that point. I can't change anything in the past, but am I willing to be here and do something different for the future? Because the forgiving everybody for everything, it would ping pong back and forth for me. Because once I started rationally going through my actions and all my excuses and blames and everything else, right, that I went through it, started realizing I was doing the best I could with my understanding at the time. That kicked in for me because a lot of it was parenting, because I had 2 kids that I had walked away from, in a family. That helped with my forgiveness of my parents who did the same thing to me. Understanding, holy cow, they were just doing the best they could with what they had to. So it was a reciprocal thing throughout, and I can still go back into beat myself up, beat my parents up, but it's less often and it's for a lot shorter amount of time.
I think the more we go through that process, the more the foundation of forgiveness is built. And so that when we fall into self-pity and remorse and morbid reflection, what we're falling on is a foundation of forgiveness versus a foundation of unforgiveness, of despair.
Self-righteousness.
Yeah. I still believe that I learned how to forgive myself by practicing the action of forgiving others. Because I'm so important, I can't possibly let go of these resentments with myself. Just ask me how important I am, I'll tell you. And learning how to forgive everybody, early childhood stuff, for everything they've ever done. And sometimes that's hard. And it's really hard because how dare they? And there are despicable, awful things that happen to people who are not responsible for that at all. So how can there be a higher power? How can there be an omnipotent being that allows this stuff to happen? You dig?
Yes.
And the answer that I came up with, that was presented to me, the answer, not that I came up with, scratch that. The answer that was presented to me was that person didn't invent that behavior. They were given that, at least in the scenario that I was involved in. That person didn't invent that behavior. They didn't coin rage. They didn't coin abuse. They didn't make it up. It was taught to them. They were gifted that at some point. They were given that behavior. They modeled it. Somebody did it to them. They took it as a modeling behavior, and then when all the conditions were right for its growth, which means they were angry, they were hungry, they were lonely, they were tired, they were, whatever was going on, they were frustrated. That behavior comes out and then is gifted on, a generational curse. That behavior is gifted on and on and on and on and on until somebody learns how to go back and forgive them, right? I'm going to use myself as an example, that I have exhibited anger and rageful behavior, just like was gifted to me. I've passed it on. I've since learned to forgive, and now I'm going to spend the rest of my life teaching my child that there is another way. There is absolutely another way. And, I hear from a lot of folks we talk to that, my family won't talk to me still. It's been a month, it's been 6 months, it's been a year, it's been 2 years. In my case, it's been multiple years that I'm learning to live this new life, and I have family members that want nothing to do with me. You know what? I forgive them. How long did I treat them poorly? And so a little blip of the clock is going to make it all okay? Well, they've got some deep-seated resentments, just like I have had, that are deep in the core memories of resentments that are a makeup of my being. And to learn to let those go, to let go of a core memory means the complete destruction and reconstruction of self. And that is a super scary process.
Lifelong one. I just
Indeed.
realized, I think I was probably quite selfish initially with my forgiveness of, bringing up stuff in the past. One specific person in my past, a neighborhood bully, I realized, I don't even know if it was forgiveness at first, but I knew if I kept every time any of those memories or situations come back, I was eating myself alive with anger and self-pity.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it falls into that acting my way into right thinking, because every time that would pop up, I've since learned, like cognitive behavior therapy, I don't need to sit and dwell on that anymore. And I can change a channel in my head. I can't always control what thought comes in, that specific person's scenarios, whatever that happened to be. But once I realize I'm thinking about it, I can change a channel now.
Mm.
And not dwell in that cycle. It was like a freight train that would start.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be having a great time. Something happened, that ting, and I am off on a mental tirade in my head about 100 things that even happened after those years that was happening that still makes me mad because that was because of that. So I can go off on a tangent, not be enjoying a beautiful day or beautiful company because mentally I'm on a tirade. So when I catch myself doing that, I got the serenity prayer down to 1, 2, 3 because I wasn't patient enough to stop and say the whole thing. But it would click over in my head to stop that mental train of thought. And it may pop right back in a few minutes later, and it might spend part of a day playing, whack-a-mole with that train. But the less often I was cycling it through, it opened up a space for me to see things in a different light. So it was totally a process through, because that's one of the rougher ones going through. And forgiveness, yeah. And what it actually is the definition of forgiveness, because I've realized I am not at all happy about that. And just as you said, hurt people hurt people. Doesn't make it okay what he did. But realizing he was doing the only thing he knew how to do.
That's forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's that person is exhibiting a learned behavior and is behaving the way that they were taught, and they don't know what they're doing. That's some people learn from family members what love is, and it is rape, incest, beating, mental abuse, physical abuse, and to them, I in a way, that's the level of love that they've been taught. So if they are to then behave in a certain way that I don't appreciate, I think the way to forgiveness is to say, well, that's what they know. That's what they were taught. How can I blame them? It's easy to blame. It's less easy to forgive. But if I'm angry at someone, who's suffering because of that anger? Like people like to say, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Exactly true.
And when I'm angry at someone, do they feel that anger? Is it transmitting through the universe to that person 1,000 miles away? I don't know for sure, but not likely.
Yeah, there so many things I didn't know, but one thing I did know was it was eating me up, and I wanted to be done with letting it eat me up.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my forgiveness, it's selfish-centered.
Well, and
I want to feel better.
Yeah.
I want to feel better and not be carrying this around.
Selfish part is I want to let go of this stuff so I don't feel the hate and misery anymore. And to learn that there's something other than hate and misery. If hate and misery, if everything's resentments and disgust and everything's that way, how would I know? Because that's all normal. Just like if everything's an emergency, then nothing's an emergency. If everything is discord, then nothing is discord. That's the normal. If everything is joyous, then nothing is joyous. It's the normal. There's the ups and downs, the light and the shadows. There's always that. But finding a way, And we may have different ways to find, or we may have the same way to find. And we're all on that journey. But finding a way to forgive everybody for everything they've ever done releases me from the resentments, from the hate, the gross feelings inside of me, and opens me up to be filled with something else.
It stops a cycle.
Yeah.
It stops a cycle from me being in a bad mood, as simple as that grump face or reaction to whoever happens to drive by and wave, and I'm flipping them off because I'm all in my brain about something 20 years ago.
Yep.
So it just feeds itself. It just stops a cycle of, all kinds of crap.
So it's talking about cutting off the faulty emotional dependencies, and that's a lot of the anger and resentments we're talking about. And once I cut those off, next paragraph, then only could I be free to love as Francis did. And we've been through this paragraph, but I'm going to read it again because to me it's powerful. Then only could I be free to love as Francis did. Emotional and instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing love appropriate to each relation of life. Expressing love appropriate to each relation of life, that stuck out to me because I used to think love was how my body parts fit with someone else's body parts. And it turns out that's maybe more akin to lust than it is to love, right? That loving, I'll share the definition that my working definition, the working definition that was gifted to me. The definition of love to me is a question. How do I give? How do I love? How do I do with no expectation of return? And then the answer to that question is honestly, I must unselfishly love to be pure. So it's almost a circle of searching, right? Seek and ye shall find. It's talking about how do I love? And then it says unselfish love. So how do I love? Unselfishly. Well, what is that? How do I love? How do I give? How do I do with no expectation of return? And the answer is a question. How do I do this? So that means practice. That means failure. That also means success. So the answer is an experiment. For me, somebody out there may have everything already. They've been conducting this experiment for, much more in depth than I have. And they may have a completely, I'd love to hear if you have, I'd love to hear your definition of love. Please put it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to our skater friend who comments on every video. We love you. Thank you very much. Please comment, what is love? Right? Insert Madonna here. I'm a material girl, living in material. I'm a material girl.
I hope you leave your singing it.
Copyright infringement.
Excuse.
Only then could I be free to love. Only then could I be free to love. This is the turning point of this letter. Only then could I be free to love as Francis did. Emotional and instinctual satisfaction. So that's what I'm craving. I want to be satisfied. I want my emotions and my instincts. I want to be somebody. I want to be loved. I want to be safe. I want to make a difference in the world, right? My emotional and instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends. So there's more than just that. The extra dividends of having love. Well, then what is love? Offering love. What are we talking about? What's love? And expressing love appropriate to each relation of life.
Yeah, what's the point if you don't share it?
Exactly. Plainly, I could not avail myself to God's love until I was able to offer it back to Him by loving others as He would have me. More directions. There's something serious here. I could not avail myself to God's love. So I'm able to receive my higher power's love. In this conversation, in this letter, we're using the word God. Feel free to replace that with any word you find necessary. But I could not avail myself to God's love until I was able to offer it back to Him by loving others as He would have me. So there's a couple of things there. I can receive the love I've been seeking, the emptiness, the void in my chest, where I carry my anxiety, right? That crushing feeling in the center of my chest, my solar plexus. Some people carry it in their legs or their back or their shoulders or their hips. I carry mine right here in my solar plexus, and it's a crushing vacuumous void that apparently is filled up with love when I allow it to be. And it tells me that that's God's love. And I am able to receive that when I offer it back to him, right? So how do I offer God love? Because I want it. I'm selfish and greedy. I want that love. So how do I get it? I offer it back to him. Okay, so how do I love God? And it says, by loving others as he would have me. So there's an education process. Okay, how does God want me to love others? How do I give? How do I do? How do I love with no expectation of return? That's the question that answers. And then what follows is, honestly, comma, I must unselfishly love to be pure. Unselfish love. It's so circular. It keeps presenting itself, that unselfish love, which the definition for me of unselfish love is the question. How do I give? How do I love? How do I do with no expectation of return? It's cyclical. It keeps going around. And I couldn't possibly do that so long as I was victimized by false dependencies. If it's not of love, then it's taking me out of that sunlight of love. Love is still the answer, says the linguistical master Jason Mraz. Love is still the answer. It always has been. What do we take with us when we go? Do we take material possessions? Do we take cars? Do we take money? Do we take jewelry? Do we take other people with us when we go? It turns out we take with us what we've given in this life. So if I unselfishly love and I receive that my higher power's love in return, then that's what I take with me when I go. At least that's what I get out of that answer.
Well, I don't think he's talking about any time about going. I think he's talking about right now and living life. Like instead of that carrot out there, oh, you'll be rewarded if. Because this says, I could not avail myself to God's love. Not meaning like a deserve. This is avail myself to what's already there. Freely given. That God's love.
It's all encompassing.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, okay. But as long as I'm victimized by false dependencies, like he's saying, the perfectionist dreams and specification of others doing what I think they should when they should do it. As long as I'm victimized by those standards in my head that I'm only going to have love or show you love if you're doing or acting how you ought to, if I'm only offering you love, if you're all those contingencies on me being kind to you, my victimizer, if I ran into him today, I would like to say, and I did just recently, one of them, and was kind. I can't do that. I can't have those actions because every bit of this isn't thinking it. It's having, offering, and expressing. It's all doing words. I can't be kind and loving to others if I'm victimized by depending on only giving that away if they act a certain way. And unconditional doesn't just mean I'll only do it to you if you show me back. It's I'm going to show you love regardless of whether I like how you're acting or not right now.
Correct. I also don't have to tolerate somebody's abusive behavior. I do have a choice. I can walk away.
Oh, yes. I can lovingly walk away from a bunch of different people.
I can love you from way over there.
Yeah.
So the joy can be had here and now just by practicing all of these things. But what of those who have this belief of, well, the hereafter? What's going to happen then? What's the point? Why not address that?
You don't want to know my answer on that.
Well, is that selfish for you to say that?
Oh, maybe. I have no idea, so I don't care what happens after I live. I will find out then. To me, that's not the do this or bad things will happen afterwards or do this and good things will happen afterwards.
You're stuck. You're stuck in an old dichotomy. There's so much more than just that.
Yeah.
There is. And who knows what it is, those who have gone before, those who have discovered next. But the answer has still been presented, that we take with us what we've done. What we've given away in terms of emotions is what we take with us.
Yeah, so I'm good with living today for the best of that fulfillment as it's happening now. I don't have any concerns about what happens after I die.
There's some books, and it tells us, it gives us a description of somebody's description of what they witnessed, right? So I choose to believe what they witnessed. I only knew that I was living in hell here and now. I was living in despair. I was living in hate. I was living in distrust. I was living in paranoia. I was living in greed. I was living in lust. I was living in hell here and now. Choose whatever word you want for that hell, right? And I can taste of heaven, taste of love, taste of joy and peace and serenity by letting go of everything I thought I knew and learning to accept what possibly could be. And I couldn't possibly do that as long as I was victimized by false dependencies in the here and now.
So dependence for that feeling of okayness is what he's talking about. For me to feel okay, it meant demand, meaning possession, have those material things, what I think I want, when I want it, how I want it, in control of the people and conditions surrounding me. If people would just act how I want them to, if no one would pull out in front of me when I'm in a hurry and drive slow, if my kids would just pick up their mess and me not have to be doing this, if my spouse would just kiss me more often, it would be, silly things like the dependencies and demand of not being okay or not feeling okay unless everybody else is catering to how I feel they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that dependence. I think that's what he means. That's demands. He lays it out what he's meaning by those demands.
I agree.
Dependence.
So we got to let go of those demands for people, places, and things to behave the way we want them to. While those words, absolute dependence, may look like a gimmick, they were the ones that helped to trigger my release into my present degree of stability and quietness of mind. Qualities that I am now trying to consolidate by offering love to others, regardless of the return to me. I love how everything just fits together like a puzzle. Absolute dependence. I have absolute dependence. Insert your own spiritual term here. While those words, absolute dependence, may look like a gimmick, they were the ones that helped to trigger my release into my present degree of stability and quietness of mind. So, having absolute dependence upon, I'm going to call it love. That's my higher power's name, is love. Unselfish love, to be more precise. So, if I'm to apply this into what I've been learning, if I have absolute dependence upon unselfish love, they do release me into a degree of stability and quietness of mind, because my mind was noisy. It was chaotic. It was telling me all kinds of things. It was like a tornado, and the same cow was flying around in the tornado, coming by me every 20 seconds, mooing, and it looked like it was 20 cows.
Cow.
It's really just one cow.
Another cow.
Actually, I think that was the same one.
It's just flying around in a tornado. And so once it quiets down, the tornado dies down, I see that it's just one cow. Does that make sense?
It does. Well, and he's referring up to that other paragraph. My basic flaw had always been dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstance to supply me with prestige, security, and the like.
But he's using absolute dependence in another way now, in paragraph 14. While those words, absolute dependence, may look like a gimmick, they were the ones that helped to trigger my release. At least that's how I'm seeing it. I have absolute dependence. And it's just no longer on people, places, or things.
Oh, see, I think this kind of gets to the heart of the whole premise of the program that he founded, is our bottoms were at the start of our rebirth. Those absolute dependence, that's what I was going with that, is that bottom was our springboard.
Is it possible that we still have absolute dependence, that piece we had right, The absolute dependence we have correct. It's just what we're dependent upon. We choose things that are future ashes, future rust. That we're presented with alternative options that look so shiny and new. Objects. The absolute dependence wasn't wrong, but is what we're dependent upon. Because while those words, absolute dependence, may look like a gimmick, they were the ones that helped to trigger my release. He doesn't say if it's right or wrong, good or bad, up or down. He says they were the ones that helped to trigger my release into a present degree of stability and quietness of mind. Qualities that I am now trying to consolidate by offering love to others, regardless of the return to me. So honestly, I must unselfishly love to be pure. This seems to be the primary healing circuit, an outgoing love of God's creation and His people, by means of which we avail ourselves of His love for us. It is most clear that the real current cannot flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. So now we're referring to dependencies again, but now it's paralyzing dependencies. So I think there are different types of dependencies. I can depend. I think it's an appropriate use of dependence, of being interdependent or full-on dependent. I can be interdependent with you and full-on dependent with my Creator. Personally, in my current state, that's a good use of dependency, right? Where am I independent? I don't know. I don't really. Is independence actually a thing? Can we be independent from anything? It's just, what are we dependent upon? So I'm going to ask you that question. What is independence? Can we be truly independent? Self-sufficient. Completely.
I'd say no. By mere fact of we can't create ourselves.
Agreed. I may be able to plant the seeds that grow the food, but I need sunshine and water.
We didn't give birth to ourselves.
Right? I mean, if I take it into a more modern age, I'm very independent. I earn my own money. I pay my own bills. I drive my own car. Right? I'm speaking in general terms.
Yeah.
But where's the car come from? Where do the components of the car come from? Who's putting it together? Am I dependent upon somebody at the manufacturing plant to assemble those pieces so that I can spend the money that I'm independently earning? Oh, wait, I needed some place to go earn that money, so I'm dependent upon that. So I think independence is a falsity.
I agree.
To be dependent is quite all right. It's just, who are we interdependent with? Who are we team members with? Who's on our team? And where is my absolute dependence?
This is one of my favorite paragraphs in here.
Go ahead.
The healing circuit, the cycle of reciprocity. And I like how it puts an outgoing love of God's creation. Everything. This air we breathe, the dirt we walk on, everything. And as people. By means of which we avail ourselves, meaning we make ourselves available to this already love that's always, always everywhere.
So it means I can get it anytime.
Open to it.
Yeah.
We just got to be open to it.
Yeah.
And if we're wrapped up in our head about, F that person that I just talked to, cause we are not open to everything always happen around us. He says avail ourselves to it's always everywhere.
So I'm the one that blocks it.
Yeah.
And it's my brain is the block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My best thinking got me in a deep hole.
It always has to do with my thinking. My brain is the blockage.
Yeah.
It's most clear that the real current cannot flow until our paralyzing dependencies are broken, and broken at depth. And that's in relationships, that's a scary thing, right? Breaking those paralyzing dependencies and breaking them at depth, because that fissure, that crack, that void, that canyon starts to be created between people, places, or things, and it feels so scary to be separated. And I can only speak for myself. In my own case, I took on different dependencies. I would rely upon other people, places, or things to fill in those gaps. And that's where the danger for me comes in, is I'll fill in a void. So real world scenario, I'm learning this new way of life and learning how to let go of all these old fears. As a youngster, I was very much into 1/10 scale remote control cars. And I bought them, bought them, operated them, broke them, fixed them. It was this whole big circle. It was great. Would enter competitions. It was wonderful. I loved it. And played with them with my friends. And early on in this process, I almost jumped headlong into that hobby once again. And not only would it have cost, a whole bunch of money, but it would have filled in all my time. And that would have been great, because then I wouldn't have to think about anything. So I would be dependent upon this activity to supply me with the happiness that I was lacking. And when, not if, when that failed to sustain the happiness for an extended period of time, I would then go on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. It turns out what I was looking for, at least to present moment, what I was looking for was, how do I give? How do I love? How do I do with no expectation of return? That's the answer. To avail myself of God's love, I must love others the way He would have me, which doesn't mean with my body parts, right? It means, how do I give of myself? How do I share of this solution? How do I share of this walk that I'm on? And we all have these different gifts, right? Your experience is different than my experience, is different than his experience, is different from her experience, is different from their experience. But together, right, if we're all in a room together, I'm pretty darn certain that anything I'm going through in that moment, one of y'all has been through it and can help point me in the right direction. That's the benefit of the community. I've had this vision for a long time of a community. And maybe that's the shared community of those who have suffered in the same way. Maybe it's a shared community of all people who like remote control cars. Maybe it's a shared community of people who like to canoe or kayak, or who knows? Or maybe it's those who share of a higher power, which in broad sense, I really enjoy the broad sense, which to me has been presented as love, unselfish love. Which again, the answer to that, what is unselfish love, is a question. How do I give? How do I love? How do I do? With no expectation of return. It's all, to me, it's all cyclical. And the answer keeps being presented each time I go out and ask the question and try the experiment of, how do I do this? And then the answer is provided again. Honestly, I must unselfishly love to be pure. And I get to taste a little of that purity. I get to taste a little of that love each time I go out and I practice. And I fall on my face. Did it this morning. I tried. That one didn't work. That goes in the no column. Don't do that. We'll try later. When that tornado slows down, we'll try a different way. Right? And I really like that. Only then can we... This really meant so much to me as I'm reading this letter. And it references adult love. Only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. And I paused and I had these visions and these memories of my parents and their friends, and my parents and each other, and my parents and me. And when I think of adult love, it's funny, when I think of adult, I think of my parents. Right? Because I've still been a child. And so therein is another level of forgiveness, is forgiving myself for being a man-child and not understanding what this stuff is. I watched adult friends of my parents kiss each other. And I'm like, what is going on here? Well, they love one another. Now, was it the groovy kind of fish keys in the fishbowl kind of love? I don't think so. I just think they loved each other and they gave each other smooches. I've told my sister about this and she's like, no way, that did not happen. I think my parents might deny it too, but I watched it.
I just got what you meant by fishbowl love. That just.
I'm glad you. Do we need to take a pause?
I don't need to know what the reference is, but it was still there. Like, what does that mean?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, maybe some people will get that reference. I don't know. But adult love. And when I'm released from the bonds of my adolescent behaviors, earlier in the letter it talks about emotions that so appropriate at age 17, which are no longer appropriate at age 47 or 57. Yeah, here it is. Those adolescent urges that so many of us have for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romance, urges quite appropriate to age 17, prove to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 and 57. Crap, they're talking about me. And then down here, so we're second from the, no, where are we?
Third
from the last paragraph. And it says, only then can we possibly have a glimmer of what adult love really is. So what was appropriate at age 17 is not necessarily appropriate now. So my definition, my understanding, my outgoing love evolves. There's a deeper, fuller meaning to it.
Yes, and realizing also, you had made the comment, love isn't necessarily sex.
I had that all wrong.
Yeah, and not just, different kinds of sex. Like literally, I've had the benefit, I think I was lucky personally to have friends that were male and female growing up that I loved to death. Like, and to this day, would be there for them. Mm-hmm. Even though we don't have daily or weekly or monthly communication. And realizing that I can care very deeply for someone and it have nothing to do with whether or not I'm having sex with them.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing now also as I get older and hearing from other people that that's a foreign concept. Love is like you either love there's only two different kinds of love, the way you love your kids and the way you love your spouse. And that's all there is to it.
That's the adolescent love.
Yes. Yes, that's all there is. And
well, this was hard to hear for me. Because I thought I knew I would know everything. If I'm listening to this right now and I'm saying you're full of crap, this makes no sense, I'm angered, I'm upset, you don't know what you're talking about, then we're talking to you. Because it was talking to me.
Yeah.
A firsthand experience. There's more. There's so much more. And just because we don't know there's more does not mean there is not more. Because I don't know what I don't know. And what I know now is there is more. More to everything. There's way more up and there's more down. Right? There's way more light and there's more dark. There's more love. And there's the kind of love that we just want to care and get to know and be around. I met a guy, I'm going to call him my spiritual mentor, right? And when I first met him, the very first time, I saw something in his eyes that I had no idea what I was looking at, a light. I've since learned more about what that means. But I couldn't have told you what it was, but I saw a light in his eyes that I could not describe, that I did not recognize, and all I knew is I wanted to be around that guy. And I couldn't have told you anything else. I had no definition to what that was. I had no idea what I was looking at. I just knew there was something about him that I wanted to be near. And he became my spiritual mentor. And turns out he had a level of spirituality that I did not know existed. Or, more appropriately, that I had forgotten about at a very early age. And therefore, I'd forgotten that it existed. And that's really the truth I'm discovering for myself, and maybe for some others, that as a very young child, I'm talking 2 years old, and I've heard stories of 4-year-olds, and I've witnessed a 4-year-old have a level of understanding and peace and ease that I did not know existed. It's not that I didn't know existed, it's I forgot about it. It was so early that my core memories didn't obtain it. It didn't retain it. There's a story my guy talks about. The 4-year-old walks into a 1-year-old's room, and mom overhears the whole thing, and I believe this story. 4-year-old walks into a 1-year-old's room and says, "Tell me about God. It's starting to fade." The 1-year-old doesn't have linguistical skills yet, but they're communicating. And I believe that. I witnessed my daughter at 4 years old doing things that, and exhibiting behaviors that I don't know where she learned them. It wasn't from us. That's pretty neat. And we start out that way. And then the world gets in the way. So I'm allowed to forgive myself. I'm allowed to forgive myself because, well, it happens to a lot of us. That the world and trauma and perceptions, they all get in the way. They block that out. My brain takes over. And I forget that I got this heart. If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand. Let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to gain emotional sobriety. When I remember to do it, and I don't always remember to do it, and I'm being reminded of some stuff that happened this morning, I'm being reminded by reading this letter that I have this ability to examine the disturbance that I felt. And at the root of it is an unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand. Anytime I'm disturbed, anytime, if I examine it, if I'm willing, and there's a key right there, if I'm willing to dig into the disturbance and not just be like, get a case of the effets, screw them. If I actually get into it and figure out what it is that's really disturbing me, well, they behaved this way, they said this, they. Well, let's go back. Maybe it was an early childhood, something happened to me, and somebody wouldn't listen to me. And I was trying to tell them something, how I felt, what was happening, maybe something that was happening to me. I was trying to communicate it with someone else, or something was happening to me. I was being molested, and I tried to tell somebody about that, and they laughed hysterically at me. And so I shut my mouth. I didn't say anything. So when someone today has a reaction that I don't appreciate, I'll shut down. Is that the appropriate thing to do? Or am I behaving in an adolescent way? So the only way for me to get past that today, to be able to get through those feelings of inferiority, of being laughed at and humiliated, the only way is to go back in time and forgive the people who laughed at me. And then forgive the person who perpetrated the molestation. Forgive them. Because I don't think any of them invented any of that stuff. The person who laughed at me, somebody laughed at them. This is how you behave when somebody is confiding in you. You laugh at them. They were laughed at. They didn't invent it. And the person who perpetrated the molestation, they didn't invent that. Chances are that was done to them. They were shown that this is love. They were taught. And that happens. I go back to the old power line analogy. There's a huge steel girder, power line, power tower. There's a tower of power, this huge, I don't know what they call them, the high tensile strength power lines or whatever. This huge tower with many power lines attached to it, and it's carrying electricity to hundreds, maybe thousands of homes in the area, and that electricity is providing light and warmth and dinner and entertainment and all the things. It's lighting up and bringing light and warmth and sustenance to thousands of homes in the area. How beautiful is that? Can I do that? Am I able to provide light and entertainment and sustenance and warmth to thousands of homes in the area? No. So by definition, that power tower is a power greater than myself. It's a higher power by definition. Yes? Mm-hmm. So is it reasonable to believe that somewhere in town, at this very moment, where there is light and warmth and entertainment and sustenance, that someone is getting their butt beat? Is it reasonable to think that right now somebody is getting abused? Somebody's getting molested? Somebody might be getting murdered right now? And what does that have to do with the electricity? That higher power, that electricity that's going into the homes and providing light and heat and sustenance. Terrible, awful, despicable things happen that ought not happen. But I can't blame the tower of power. I can't blame the electricity. It didn't do it. Who did it? Who did it?
The person.
The person. And why in the world would they do that? I think the general easy answer is free will. And I think a more difficult answer is it's a learned behavior. Somebody did it to them. And when they get angry enough or upset enough or sad enough or hurt enough, they go to that behavior and do it. What are your thoughts on that?
I like how you said, I think that's the start of opening up, where you said about going back and thinking about that forgiveness, that's how not to repeat it. I think that's just a drop in the bucket, because I'm processed back through my forgiveness, but it says here, continually surrender these hobbling demands.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me that I have reacted or acted in certain ways over and over again for many, many years. My emotional reactions, my verbal reactions, my physical reactions. That even with that understanding or allowing for forgiveness, someone reacts, like you said, shut down if you're laughed at. That may not stop overnight just because I understand it.
Agreed.
So that acting my way into better thinking, I think, falls in, because it's a repetition of these skills. There's nothing that I can do today that I did and instantly did as well as I do today the first time I did it. And that's the same with deconstructing, in my opinion, all these learned behaviors. I spent my first half of life, some things I've carried through and work well and are not having devastating effects to me and others around me. A bunch of them I've had to unlearn over the years, and by doing these things, the paying it forward, the having love, offering love, expressing love that he's talked about here. St. Francis talks all over about it. I may not feel like giving, or I may not, it clicks in, you were a jerk, I'm not going to smile and be kind to you, but doing those things instead of the way I used to helps my rewiring. And as that happens, I start understanding. For me, more has kicked in on a different level. Like, man, this feels good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want more of this.
That's the educational process, is letting go of those old behaviors. And it's hard because that's our go-to. But slowly over time, those little pieces get flicked away, and we replace it with a smile or mine was thank you, right?
Yes, you're good with your thank you.
But it turns into something else. So what starts out, when I really want to say, take a hike, buddy, I say thank you. That's rewiring my verbal cues. And then there's more that gets rewired. And I don't have words for it. My emotional cues, my heart cues, they're all tied in. How I communicate with you, my words, my utterances. Words mean everything, but words mean nothing, right? What are words? A bunch of squiggly lines put together that in this area of the world we recognize those squiggly lines. And what are words? A bunch of utterances and grunts that in this area of the world we recognize those utterances and grunts and we can communicate. Well, what are the intentions with those words and those the speech? What are the intentions? What do I mean? In the beginning, I may start off by saying thank you instead of saying, hey, take a hike. But in the end, I'm learning that it has more with I love you than it does take a hike. Opposites happen, right? And I may say thank you and not really mean it in the beginning, but at the end, I'm feeling better. It has to do with what's inside of me. And if I'm saying screw you, then that's how I'm feeling. But if I say thank you, it's almost like I'm tricking myself into a better way. Those are the actions. I'm acting my way into better thinking. So if I say thank you as opposed to, get out of here, I'm tricking myself. I'm training myself into accessing a different part of my brain, perhaps, maybe my heart. And that thank you becomes more real. And instead of just saying a nice word so I don't curse at somebody, now oftentimes I really mean thank you. It's been a neat exercise of slowly, progressively removing gross words from my vocabulary, hurtful words, removing. I enjoy media. Not news media, but like movies and shows. I enjoy them very much, and I had to intentionally, purposefully remove certain types of media. Porn was brought up to me from someone, and I've seen that type of thing before, right? Well, many of us may have, and when we would watch it, it would bring a certain type of enjoyment that was very fleeting. And over time, people progressively get into that type of behavior, and the pleasure centers of the brain are triggered by a certain amount of that, and then it's a little bit more, and then it's a different kind, and it evolves until eventually we become numb. And as we remove ourselves from that type of, I'm going to remove porn from it. I don't want to be discussing porn here. The murder flicks.
It's totally, though, a very perfect
Should we be talking about porn?
relation.
Okay, we will.
Relation, because
All right, we'll talk about porn.
It does suit. Well, it's real.
It brings it elicits thoughts and behaviors that are learned from what I'm taking in. I am now very conscious of what I'm allowing in, because it's part of what creates me. It's part of that's not rightly said. I'm very cautious of what I allow in, because that's what I'm digesting. And what I digest becomes a part of me, and that's what I give out. So if I'm bringing in hurtful media, gross action flicks, pornography, dirty jokes, then that's what I'm giving out. That's the information I have to give. This exercise started a few years ago, where I started removing certain media, certain shows that I very much enjoyed in the past. I started removing them intentionally. I'm not going to watch this one anymore. I'm not going to watch that type anymore. I'm not going to listen to this anymore. And my behavior started to evolve. And the interesting thing was, the more that I allowed my behaviors to evolve, the more I didn't really care about that kind of stuff. I didn't enjoy it anymore. What I take in is what I digest, which then becomes a part of me, and I have to give out. So if I'm taking in enlightening, teaching, wonderful things, then I digest that, and I learn, and then I have some more to give. If I'm taking in what I used to take in, all the same old stuff, then that's what I have to give, the same stuff. If I'm taking in, I'm going to call it here, and maybe this will offend some people, I don't know. What if I'm taking in dark material? So I'm talking about things that hurt others. I'm talking about degrading things. I'm talking about really gross, awful language. I'm not opposed to bad words, right? Swear words. I don't like to use them because I don't like how they make me feel anymore. But I'm not opposed to them. People are going to talk how they talk. But if I'm taking in obscenely gross material, then that's what I'm digesting, and that's what I have to give out. I know a certain fellow right now that they very much enjoy watching a certain level of media, and they wonder why they can't have a healthy relationship. Well, it's because we're basing what a relationship looks like on pornography. I understand that. I have that experience. There's also some science behind it, like it's triggering a certain part of our brain, and males get a certain level of satisfaction, and then I don't know what it's like. It's like here's the money on the dresser. Get out. I don't know. This is getting edited out. I feel like I'm breaching on shaky topics, bringing up stuff like this. But possibly this is part of this experiment. We're all afflicted, and it's not a judgment. I mean, we all start somewhere. Should I be angry or upset or afraid because of something I watched or enjoyed for quite some time or became addicted to? Right? Well, I can't go to sleep unless I watch this. For a long time, I was watching like like the country India, Indian manufacturing videos where they were making steel parts, like melting metals and creating parts. And that's how I went to sleep. And every night, that's what I was watching. And then I was having some really weird dreams. So I started listening to audiobooks to go to sleep, to quiet the storm in my mind. And the last few nights, I haven't listened to anything. And that's a neat evolution. It also helps that I'm tired. But it's been a really neat evolution to cut these faulty dependencies. I'm not dependent upon a show or a type of media or a certain type of food, although I really love coconut popsicles. I could eat 3 or 4 at a sitting. I can cut that faulty dependency. And how do I do that? Well, if I got them in the house, I'm going to eat them. So I just don't bring them in the house. And that's a good way to start. If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root of it some unhealthy dependence on people, places, or things, and its consequent demand. Let us, with help, God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Well, I demand that these people give me respect. Well, I've got to surrender that. They don't have to give me anything. They don't owe me that.
I mean, that is just so slight as that lady was a bitch at the checkout stand, and then walking away with that state of mind that you're pissed at someone else because they didn't treat you the way that you think they ought to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't just big things. This is just daily happenstance. Just like how dare they pull out in front of me and go slower than I want them to go.
Yeah.
And sitting in that state of mind and totally miss, the eagle flying in the sky and it's a nice day or whatever. I am sucking air and here and available to be able to live in a life that I'm able to bitch about slow drivers.
Yes.
Our growth is up to us.
Then we can be set free to live in love. We may be able to gain emotional sobriety. Of course, I haven't offered you a really new idea, only a gimmick that has started to unhook several of my own hexes at depth. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. Bill Wilson. So he recognizes that this isn't a new thing. It's just something that he stumbled upon. Likely through the prayer of St. Francis, because that's what he's referencing to many times. He's just digging into and using that teaching to evolve and better his life and then unselfishly love others by sharing it with them. Because this letter was written to a friend of his who was sinking into a depression. And he's like, yeah, me too. I recognize you. I see you. You're not alone sinking into depression. Here's what I did. So how do I give? How do I love? How do I do with no expectation of return? This is what works for me. May I share it with you? So this whole letter is a practice in exactly what we're talking about. Nowadays, my brain no longer races. Oh, how beautiful. How beautiful that is. Just simply put, races compulsively in either elation or grandiosity, which I can relate to that. Woohoo, look at me, I'm the best ever. Or depression. Oh yeah, I can relate to that. The swings, the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys. And I think there's a beautiful answer in this last sentence. I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. And in this program, we talk about the peaks and valleys. We talk about the highs and the lows. And people say, get in the center of the bed, stay in the center of the bed. They're talking about get in the middle. Don't fall victim to the highs and the lows. It's been my personal experience. And I've called you when I'm on a personal high. I feel so awesome that I got to call somebody and tell them about it. You received that call. And it wasn't too long after, maybe 24 hours, that I was in an emotional low. My emotional peaks are almost always followed by an emotional valley. It's the swings. And that the steady, like an oscilloscope, the steady, just there are still ups and downs, but they're not as drastic. And if I can learn to be happy in those highs and lows that aren't so severe, like do I need the peak of Mount Everest to be happy? Or is going for a nice walk in a rolling green meadow, will that do it? You know what I mean? A nice quiet place in the bright sunshine. How warm and content that is. One of the first times I read this letter, I was sitting out back of an old employer by a creek, babbling brook, in the middle of an industrial center. There's like deer paths and tall grass and this babbling brook. And I remember sitting there at a picnic table and the sun was shining just on my face as I'm reading this letter. And I could feel the warmth and I could hear the babbling brook. And I didn't need to be racing a motorcycle, and I didn't need to be, suffering in my basement trying to quiet the voices in my head. I could just enjoy a picnic table next to a green meadow, listening to a babbling brook. To an adrenaline junkie, that doesn't sound very exciting, but it was beautiful.
I like that. I've been given a quiet place and bright sunshine. Just recently, I have found that with some low things, or what we conceived as low or hard things to go through in life, with my parents' health, and we were talking earlier about things that are new just seem weird. Just weird. Is feeling okay and good and seeing the blessings in even, the best words I came up with is seeing light in low places. Being in a low place and still seeing the light of it and the purpose of it. And understanding that. Not trying to avoid those lows. Not trying to avoid those emotions because I'm good at that. I got to watch for that for myself. For avoiding those emotions. And yeah, just realizing it's every bit of this path, whether I like or dislike how things are going, overall, for the most part, I feel content.
That's the oscilloscope.
Yeah.
Right there in the middle.
And it's weird sometimes. I can just here recently in the last couple weeks sitting there thinking, this is weird. I feel like I should be more upset or more something. Or then, of course, I jump right in. Am I doing something wrong? Am I denying my feelings? Because I still doubt myself. Still can jump to that. But yeah. This emotional sobriety has been something else.
Indeed.
I had no clue coming into this that just, as he talks in the very beginning of this letter about the booze cure, I just had no idea what was on the other side of that door.
The beauty of this is it's not just for the booze cure. This letter, this way of this way of evolution, this way of finding new answers is for any of us who feel like we're missing something. That there's got to be more. Is this it? Is this it? I have all the same things that they have. I've got all the stuff that Jones has got. And I still don't feel right. Why am I not happy? I've attained the goal. I did it. Why am I not happy? There's more. There is more. And I'm so grateful that I was able to find myself in the spot where I'd done all the things, acquired all the possessions, ran the marathons, did the racings, jumped out of planes, did all the things that I thought would make me happy and was not happy, because that led me to a place where there has to be more. And more was the I never would have thought that this would be the more. I cannot express to you how strongly I feel that I had no idea this direction was not even a blip on the radar. No flippin' way is this the way to more. And it turns out I used to think this was opposite world. And as I'm learning this is the way I'm supposed to live, that my old way of living was opposite world. And that's why I felt empty. That's why I could achieve everything, get the jobs and the money and the cars and the people and all the things, and still feel unfulfilled, because there is more, and I get to forgive myself for not knowing about it. That's really cool. I get to
be here without it.
Yeah, indeed. But that's the message to everyone who's out there, is that there is more. Wherever you're feeling empty or heartache or lacking or not good enough, there is more. There's a way to get to the place where we feel like we have a quiet place in the bright sunshine, with the warmth on our face and the babbling brook and love in our hearts and fullness. Just because we haven't found it searching the ways we've been going does not mean it's not available. I get to forgive myself because I didn't know what it looked like. How would I know? How would I know what it looks like if I've never seen it? I've got a lifetime of information that tells me it's this way. And that worked for a lot of people, but not for me. So I got to go look that way.
And I'm so grateful today that there are people like Bill Wilson, that there's so many resources to look for different and better ways, and I don't have to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of like-minded people that sit here and want to discuss these things because it's a we thing.
There is a we. This is the outgoing message of love. There is a we. You are not alone. We are here for you. There is a growing number of us. We are growing. We are among you. We are emptying your trash. We're cleaning the gutters. We're sweeping the floors. We're checking you out at stores. We're police officers. We are judges. We are business people. We are in the White House. We are flying airplanes. We are everywhere. You are not alone. Just because you don't know where we are doesn't mean we're not there. Seek. Look for the answers. Ask the questions, if even just to yourself. When you look up at a starry night and you wonder who then made all this, ask the question. You're not alone. We saved a chair for you.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. If we are wise, we know
answer your needs that you won't let show. You just call on your brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you don't understand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just call on your brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you don't understand. We all need somebody to lean on.
If there is a load you have to bear that you can carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me.
Call me. I'm right up the road. Just call me, baby. I'm right up the road. I'm a friend. Call me. I'm right up the road. You gotta call me. I'm a friend. Call me. I'll carry your load. Call me. I'll carry your load.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate you being here. How do I give? How do I love? How do I do with no expectation of return? You are loved and you are worth it.
I just love being part of this.